Yes.
All right, guys. I think we're now live for our usual Wednesday night conversations with Cougars. And I've got with me the Eufaula High School's newest principal, Reeivice Girtman, with us this evening. Reeivice, we've been chatting for a couple of minutes beforehand, and it's so good to see you. And I appreciate you making a couple of minutes for us this evening.
Listen, sir, I thank you so much for this opportunity. As everybody has said, you've taken the time and the initiative to get this started. You've interviewed and made contact with a lot of our childhood heroes and friends and people that have been, role models to us in our lives. And so I appreciate your will to do that. And I also want to take this opportunity to say, you know what? Somebody needs to lay down the gauntlet and interview you, turn the tables on you a little bit and find out what's going on with you. So hopefully somebody over the next few weeks will get an opportunity to do that.
Well, I appreciate that. If I maybe one day we'll get to that, and we'll go down that route. But I'll tell you, for now, I've got so many Cougars lined up over the next couple of months. Just all different decades, all different uh, ways that they were connected with the program, and so many awesome stories to be told,
Mm-hmm.
including yours this evening. So I know it's a Wednesday night. Normally, if we weren't in the pandemic, you've either got school, church, or family responsibilities, or all three.
Mm-hmm.
So we really do appreciate you sharing some time. Now that I've kind of told a little bit about what you're doing now, Reeivice, why don't you tell us about your beautiful family and what's going on with you these days in Barber County?
Oh man, as I guess God would have it, we've been here in Eufaula now for 20 years. I'm supposed to be here for just 3 and then matriculate on somewhere else. But I've got a family of 3 beautiful kids and certainly a wife as well. My wife, I met her in Troy and we got married, and certainly our family has grown and we've just appreciated. I've got one of my youngest children is stationed in the military, and he's in the Air Force and he's overseas right now. My 2 oldest kids are living in Dothan with the rest of my family where I'm from, obviously.
Very good. Now, your son who's in the military, where's he stationed, or are you allowed to discuss stuff like that?
Well, that's one of the nuances of having a military kid. Sometimes they can't tell you precisely where they are,
Mhm.
but he is over in the Middle East right now, and we're hoping that he'll be home soon.
Well, we certainly do, and we thank you and thank him for his service and all that he's sacrificing for us right now.
Yes.
Well, Revis, I know you grew up in Dothan. You ended up at Northview and played 3 years for Coach Harry Wayne Parrish,
Mm-hmm.
and your senior year was with Coach Whitcomb.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get to that, I like to go back even further and find a little bit of origins stories. What community did you grow up in? What kind of family, siblings? Who did you live near and play ball against? When you were younger.
Listen, wow, what a childhood I had. We grew up in a little community called Morningview, which is right behind Wilson Street Elementary School.
Mhm.
Went to Little Girard my first few years, and then went to elementary school at Wilson Street, which is kind of very centrally located when you talk about athletes. And so when I was born originally, we lived in Johnson Homes, and Aristotle talked about that Alabama Avenue, and then you've got Spring Street, which is not too far from where I am, Headland Avenue. And so we had lots of different parts of neighborhoods that would get together and play sports. We were outside all the time, and on the holidays and things like that, we get together right there on Spring Street, right along that corner, in different neighborhoods, and kids would come and play. So, guys like Kevin Jackson and Marvin Mitchell and Kalima Thompson, some of my friends, other guys that lived in my neighborhood, Willie Fields, Dwayne Thomas, some of those guys, Raven Walker, we would all come together and play and just play sports. That's what we did, whether it was football or basketball or kickball or softball, it didn't matter. We were always out busy playing. And you mentioned, my siblings and things like that. I got an older brother who's 9 years older than me. he was kind of a late bloomer. He ended up growing about 4 or 5 inches once he graduated, and was a heck of an athlete. My younger sister Dawn was an athlete. She played softball a lot before you had softball back in the high schools. And she played on one of the great one of the great travel softball teams back several years ago. So it was fun.
Well, I know that Spring Street area really, they should have made that its own community center.
Yeah.
It had the property, you know, the grounds for it, because
Oh, no doubt.
oh my gosh, so many. I mean, just the few you just listed off, there's so many athletes
Yeah.
that grew up in that community. Imagine if they'd all gone to just one high school.
Oh, tell me about it. And then just right up on the other side of Helen Avenue, I mean, you had, you know, all the Whites, you know, Willie White, Terrence White, you had Jody and Joseph White. You had all those folks that lived up in that area, Don Andrews and several other guys that we just grew up with playing ball. I mean, that's what you lived for when we were back in the day.
Yeah, it's you're just naming off just some pure athletes right there. That's so great. Well, Reeivice, I also went to Wilson Street for in between my 2 stints at Little Girard and Big Girard, the junior high or middle school. Where did you end up at middle school before coming over to Northview?
I went to Honeysuckle and played for Coach Philip Creel, the late Philip Creel. I mean, what a guy. And we had a stellar middle school football team. My 8th grade year, we scored 256 points. I still remember that. And we only gave up 6 points in like 6 or 8 games. And we got Carver scored on us on a flea flicker. But I will remember, and several guys probably do, the last game of that season, when we went to turn in our pads and all of that, we were sitting in Coach Creel's office, and he told us, he said, guys, if y'all will just stay together, you know, get your lesson, as they would say, you know, get your books, stay together. You guys have the makings of a championship team. And I mean, several of the guys that played with us at that time, you know, did not make it all the way to 12th grade. Some of them either stopped playing or, you know, had other things happen or moved away. But we were close enough where I think if we'd have kept that core group together, no doubt we probably would have played for a state championship.
We're not gonna speed ahead, but as a preview, we're gonna get to your junior year, that 1990 season, in a few minutes. And there's a whole bunch of Honeysuckle kids on that squad.
No doubt.
But when you were coming up through middle school, did you play? I assumed you played multiple sports. Most athletes like yourself just couldn't sit still and wait on the next season. So what was your favorite sport, and why was that your sport at the time in middle school?
I'll be honest with you, man. My favorite athletic thing to do is swimming. I was on the Dothan Dolphin swim team for a little while as a kid, for about 2 or 3 years. Also, you know, dabbled in karate a little bit, but I had to make a business decision at some point as I continued to grow and get bigger. Football just became the sport that I was best suited for. I did play basketball in junior high and in high school. Also played baseball my freshman year of high school, and all the little league circuits and all that kind of stuff. Played for the Dothan Boys Club and got to know a lot of my friends. But yeah, we played a lot of different sports. Ping pong and poly hockey, it didn't matter. If we could play and if we could compete, shooting pool, whatever it was. But swimming is probably my favorite pastime, and I still love to do it to this day.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. Now, I haven't asked this previously, and it really just kind of dawned on me. In my neighborhood growing up, we made some of our own games based on the size of the yard and the dimensions of the yard. We had our version of baseball called sock ball, and it literally was a sock with duct tape and a tennis racket. And right field was out of bounds. That was an automatic out. You had to hit center field and over. Trees were bases. So I know you had to have had something like that growing up. So I want you to tell me, what was that made up sport?
Oh man, you know, you brought up a good question, because a lot of times we would try to replicate basketball and football. Like if we didn't have a legitimate ball or a legitimate net and rim, like we'd take the wheel off of a bicycle and nail it to a tree. Or, you know, depending, like you said, on the dimensions of the yard, sometimes we play in somebody's yard. Wilson Street had that little bitty, that big field down at the bottom of the playground. We would always play tackle football over there. But sometimes we'd play in the street. And one of the guys in my neighborhood, I mentioned his name, Raven Walker, a second ago, if you got too close to the sideline, if we were playing in the street and you got too close to the curb, he'd tackle you. So, you know, we do all little things like that, attacking the curb, kill the man football, you know, where you just toss the ball up, all those types of things that we would do, you know, little soccer games and all those little nuances and stuff, but it was fun.
And when the street light came on, what did that mean?
Oh man, you better head to the house.
Time to go.
That's right.
Well, when you were in 8th grade at Honeysuckle, and it was, you knew you were coming over to Northview, or I guess I should ask it this way. Was there any doubt that you were coming to Northview, or did you have a choice, or was there discussion you may end up at Dothan?
All of my siblings went to Northview. My brother graduated in '83. My two sisters graduated in '88 and '89. So I looked forward to coming to Northview. And my sister, my younger sister, Dawn, who was a senior when I got there, you know, I looked forward to getting a chance to get to know, to be at school with her for the first time. And so obviously you get all the ribbon and the hazing that you do as a little brother, and you're just a little freshman over here, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But I was looking forward to coming to Northview.
And then how did she treat you? Because I got a story to share to you about what.
As you would assume, you know, she probably gave me more privileges than she wanted to. But of course, I was the freshman, so I was banned from a lot of the conversations and a lot of the activities and things that they were doing. But she'd help me at least make sure my clothes would match and would be ironed on the way to school and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because it reflected on her, not you.
That's right.
Well, Reeivice, I'll tell you how nice I was to my brother Robert. As everybody knows, he was a freshman my senior year. Well, our drive from the house to the school was, you know, maybe 10, 12 minutes. I had a no talking rule. We couldn't talk. Excuse me. He couldn't talk in the car. And Chase Letcher was our next door neighbor, and he rode with us as well. I just wasn't a morning person. I still am not. I still regret that I did that, but you know, that's what comes with the territory. But guys, I'm talking with Reeivice Girtman, and I want to give you some shout outs. We got some love coming your way, Reeivice. We got Jason Mullins, Big Gert, what's up? Shirley C says, so good to see you, Principal Girtman. Yes. Jackie Cotton, or Jackie Hydrick, you knew her as Jackie Cotton back in the day, is with us. Hey, JJ. Kevin Jackson, what's up, Gert? Oh, Kevin says, yeah, the neighborhood was full of athletes. Yeah. Kill the man with the ball. Well, Reeivice, when, you know, with having older siblings at the school, I assume as a younger kid, you came over to the school and had seen Northview and knew kind of what it looked like and how awesome the dimensions and stuff like that were.
Yes, but it was still intimidating. You know, when you walk into that building and you just go, it's hard to really comprehend just how big it is. You don't realize it until you're older and you go back to do a little tour of the school. Then your perspective changes a little bit. But trying to find your way around to all the different classes and different buildings and things like that, it took a little bit of time to get used to, but we made it work for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's like a junior college campus. It's just so spread out. Jason Keel says, "Hey, Girtman,
listen, man, I'm gonna tell you what. You are naming some of my good friends right there.
Awesome.
Yeah, good to see you guys.
So thank you guys for spending some time. We're talking with Principal Reeivice Girtman. Reeivice is with the Eufaula High School, took over the command about 2 months ago, earlier this summer, and is in school. And let's kind of divert for that for just a few minutes, Reeivice, and we'll get back to the high school days and the good lessons. You're in charge of a big school. It's a public school. It's a 6A school in Alabama. You've been in academics for many years, but I'm assuming this is your biggest post that you've had with the most responsibility, on top of the fact that you assumed the role or took the position during the pandemic, of which we've never had to deal with. And we could be here from now until next Tuesday talking about all of the issues you have to deal with. But I want you to kind of give us a broad stroke about how you're dealing with it, because clearly classes are going on, school has begun, and albeit in a completely different manner in most ways. But you're also playing football and you got sports on the agenda and y'all are doing it quite beautifully. So take a minute or two and talk to us about some of those challenges.
Well, we were talking right before we went live about some of the lessons that you learn from playing football. And one of those is dealing with adversity. Sometimes a call doesn't go your way. Sometimes there's a turnover, turnover on downs and things that are unexpected. And you learn how to handle adversity, regardless of whose fault it is when you're playing sports. And nobody saw this coming. We've not done this before. And sure, there are some challenges, but as I learned from previous work, we like to call them opportunities, because they're opportunities to rise to the occasion. They're opportunities to learn some lessons. And so obviously we're dealing with COVID, and that presents more opportunities because you want to keep everyone safe. And that's always the first objective of education, is do no harm. You want to educate kids, obviously, but you can't do that without putting them in a safe environment. And coming into Eufaula, knowing that we would be doing learning virtually from home for the first 9 weeks, we were sort of semi-set up to be able to make sure that kids had devices and they've got the Wi-Fi connections and all those different things. But not only do you have to educate the teachers and the students, you've got to educate the parents, because the parents are along for this ride, and the parents don't know how to deal with Zoom or Schoology, and what's a MiFi, what are all these different components of virtual learning, let alone keeping kids safe in the home. Then you're not going to be very successful. And so we will do a virtual open house tomorrow with our parents, trying to get them up to speed so that they know how to manipulate a lot of the technology pieces. But when you're dealing with COVID and with safety, I talk to my teachers all the time. I said, we've got to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. And so I have tried to, keep myself from being out more than I have to. And when I say out, I mean just out in public, and even dealing with some of my own family members. Those are some of the sacrifices that we have to make, because when teachers are out, another issue that you run into is a lack of substitutes. So the whole landscape is really changing, and it's forcing us to do things a little bit more differently and efficiently. But there will be some lessons that we will learn. Hopefully we can get back in the buildings pretty soon and resume things as close to normal as they used to be, because the connection is what we miss, and that's ultimately why we're here. So we're trying to stay connected, even though we have to be isolated.
Let's go out of the classroom and onto the gridiron for now. Clearly, the coaching staff and the athletes, cheerleaders, band, whoever's involved in your program, they're figuring it out. And I know week by week is a new challenge. And I guess my question to you is, from a morale standpoint, from a just overall mental standpoint, how are you seeing the first of all, the coaches? Are they dealing with things? Are they starting to figure things out? And then talk about your athletes, the student athletes, the ones who are playing as well as cheering and band, et cetera.
Well, winning is a cure-all. We know this, right? And so obviously you come off a big win against, such a 7A powerhouse as Central, a place where I've been for the previous 2 years. Everybody, begins to, walk with the chest poked out just a little bit more. But our coaches have done a phenomenal job of trying to distance our kids as much as possible. It seems like such a paradox, an oxymoron, trying to play football socially distanced.
Right.
But still, when you talk about traveling and accommodations, we've had to add additional buses so that you could keep kids spread out. We've had to sort of layer kids so that, if you've got a starter here and a second teamer here, so that you don't have everybody together if somebody ends up having to be quarantined. So they've done all those different types of things to make sure that we can not just start the season, but finish the season. We've had to limit the capacity at our football stadium to about 40%, just to make sure that we can still adequately socially distance. Again, these are just opportunities for us to figure these things out, but they have done a tremendous job. And not just football, but you got volleyball that's going on right now. And then you get, band and cheerleading, and you got basketball getting ready to come right behind it. So.
Well, the beautiful thing, if you can say that about going through a pandemic, is that just what you just said, it's creating opportunities to learn, to grow, and to figure things out. It would be way too easy just, as a principal or as an adult, as a parent, as a student athlete, uh, just put your head in the sand. Oh, it'll go away like an ostrich would.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to go away. You got to deal with it. So I applaud.
And if you would allow me to, I have to mention this because again, not only are we dealing with this pandemic, but so many other things are going on in the world and in our country right now. The election coming up, and we live in this polarized society. But another benefit from playing sports and playing football is the relationships that you get. And nothing made me happier or even more humble than when we were right in the thick of that. I got messages from guys on my former high school football team just calling to check on me and ask me how I'm doing. You mentioned somebody like Jason Keel or Jason Mullins and some of my other teammates and stuff. We just started talking about race relationships and things that we learned from playing football and playing sports in a community like Dothan and just growing up and now being grown men with kids. How do we deal with these things? How do we teach our kids to deal with these things? How do you raise a family? And I just appreciate those guys and so many others for taking the time to do that. But that's what you get, when you're in the huddle and you're sweating and you're bleeding all those days and of playing against each other. You learn to love one another despite your differences.
It's such an important point, and I appreciate you bringing that up. It's too easy to put it into an hour and a half Disney movie and put football behind it, which was a true story to a certain extent. But you're right, until you actually go through it yourself, and now as an adult, you're seeing these lifelong friendships that are continually being revitalized, whether it's through social media or however it may be. You're right. That's anytime that you can have open dialogue, regardless of your position, as long as there's dialogue and people are listening, that's what's important for society. But I do have to ask you this. You just sealed the win against Central Phoenix City. On the other side of that field are administrators and coaches who you've known for years. How big was the smile on your face when you've got people coming up to congratulate you?
I really have matured, in my older days. I got a little gray on my chin now. In my younger days, I would have gloated like you would not have believed. But, they were nothing but professionals. They wished us nothing but success. They were happy for me. They were happy for our team. Obviously, that always means that you've got work to do because we went the next week and lost to Lee on a Thursday night game.
Just getting ready to say it. You can't rest on your laurels too long.
That's right. It teaches you a little bit of humility. So, you learn from that, but it certainly was sweet because nobody outside of our players expected for us to be able to pull that off.
Well, gosh, that was, and we won't belabor it much longer, but Central Phoenix City is just loaded with so much Saturday and potentially some Sunday talent that Coach Nix has over there. So hopefully continued winning ways for the Eufaula Tigers. But before we keep on our conversation, Reeivice, we got a whole bunch of folks who've rolled in here and want to share some love with you. Let's see. Dawn Truitt says, hey, bro. Pat Fitch sends love to the Girtman family. Kalima Thompson's watching.
My man.
Berger, Coach Harry Wayne Parrish. Coach. Big Cat Aristotle says, hey.
Yes.
So thank you guys. I'm talking with Reeivice Girtman, and we're going to get back now into that 9th and 10th grade years. Now, for a while, Coach Cleveland and Coach Tribune were the 9th grade coach. But I want to say Coach Cleveland had left by then. Who were your 9th grade coaches for football?
So Coach Tribb was there. We also had Coach Andrews and Coach Gary Atkins were there when we were playing 9th grade football. And so my freshman year when I was coming in, I think that was Coach Ragsdale was getting ready to go, but of course he was playing, he was coaching the varsity. But those 3 guys were our primary coaches as 9th graders.
And how awesome or awful was it to practice in the bowl, in the pit down below?
Listen, man, we loved it. When you got to remember when we were most of us were in like 6th grade, that's when, you guys won the state title. And so, they bring you over there, you sit in the driver's ed room and you watch the tape. You mentioned, Aristotle Kirkland picking up the fumble and running it back. And I told you that Coach Creel had just told us we had championship potential. So you go and you watch that film and you get all hyped up and you're constantly looking out there on the field and seeing those guys going, man, I can't wait to get out there. Yet we were very competitive as a ninth grade football team. We got to grow and learn and still be a part of what was happening, up on top at the big field, but it was still fun.
Where were they having you play as a ninth grader?
We played most of our games on the road, to be honest with you. I remember the first time we played, we went to Cairo, Georgia, and played the syrup makers over there. But I really don't remember where we played most of our home games, so I just remember most of those road games.
What about what position-wise, where were you playing?
I played defensive tackle and I played defensive end some as a freshman. I played, either one of those two positions for most of my high school career. I'd played different positions coming up, in little league ball and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's where I played.
As a ninth grader, do you remember your height and your weight when you entered high school?
Man, I remember wearing a size 14 shoe. I remember that. But yeah, I was probably about 6 feet, maybe about 225, something like that, as a freshman, pretty little, stout little joker, but yeah.
By the time you graduated, what were you?
So here's a unique story. I'll tell you about Gary Atkins in just a minute. So a lot of people don't know this, but my junior year, going into my junior year, I had this little spot on my face here, still got a scar. Mm-hmm. And I went to the doctor, and the first doctor I went to told me that it was cancerous, and it scared the living daylights out of me. Mm-hmm. And you're coming into your prime athleticism years and all those types of things, and so it about drove me crazy, man. I probably lost about 20 or 30 pounds. I was up from probably my junior year, I probably played about 240, close to 250. My senior year, I probably played about 210, 215, which took me from playing defensive front, from a defensive tackle position to playing, with no hands on the ground, so I played a little bit defensive end. We were able to flex our defense a little bit, but that helped me tremendously because I lost a little bit of weight and got a whole heck of a lot more athletic. I was pretty athletic for my size, but I could run a lot faster, jump a lot higher, and do a little bit more things athletically. Because of that, I ended up finding out from another doctor, shout out to Dr. Robert Ash, one of the best dermatologists in the world, in my opinion, what it was, and we began to treat it. And so, as you can tell, I'm still living.
Well, very good. I'm glad for the outcome, but I'm sure it was scary as a 16, 17-year-old. So learn something like that. Well, I want to know what your earliest memories about playing for the varsity, when you got into some action on the field in a game for the Northview Cougars. You had 3 siblings, had already come through the school. You knew what Cougar pride was, but now it was your time to be part of that as a varsity player. Was this in 10th grade or 11th grade, or when did you start playing some varsity time?
It was in 10th grade. Zeke Moses Lee, another childhood friend of mine, was the starting defensive tackle. He was starting as a junior, and I was playing behind him. Another guy, Chris, what was Chris's last name? I can't remember Chris's last name, but I was part of that second tier rotation as a sophomore and got a chance to play a little bit. I think that was the year that we had the 4 overtime game against Dothan High, one of those years. But it was exciting, to get your name called out, in front of everybody at Rippview Stadium. Of course, they would butcher my name for the first couple of years. It wasn't until my senior year that they finally started pronouncing my name right. So that made it a little bit fun and interesting.
You probably had 6 or 8 different pronunciations on where you were playing tonight. Well, let's stay on the field a little bit. I know that your junior year was that 10-2 season, 3 straight playoff games against Mobile area schools. The first one was a blowout against Fairhope at home. Then you had to go to Mobile for, I don't know why the scheduling played out this way, but you went 2 straight weeks to Mobile. You beat Viger in 3 overtimes the second round. And then we had Murphy, the 3 overtimes, which Coach Josh Parrish still swears, and I know Jason Mullins is going to chime in, that field goal by Jinsu was good.
No doubt. It was absolutely good. It was absolutely good. But wow, what memories. I mean, what memories. There was an incident that happened down at Pritchard Stadium a week or so before we got down there. And I remember Coach Parrish telling us, guys, we are getting dressed. We went to a hotel somewhere and got dressed before we went to the stadium. And he said, when the game's over, win, lose, or draw, you better have your butt on that bus because we are getting out of there.
Well, he tells you that that's from experience as well. You may or may not know this, but my senior year, our opening playoff game, we played the #1 team in the state, Opelika, at Opelika. They're 10-0, they're undefeated. They've got all kind of awesome talent, but we went into Opelika and upset them, the #1 team. Mm-hmm. And after the game or late in the game, one of our students was actually stabbed by an Opelika kid in the parking lot or in the stadium. He lived, but charges were pressed. But Coach Parrish knew about this. He also probably on many occasions, and he told us these stories, that we would have things thrown at the bus. The bus would, were rocked back and forth. So he didn't want to play around. I'm sure by this time, and then knowing what had just happened in Mobile. But where were you when that kick was kicked? Were you on the field goal team or were you on the sidelines at the time?
I was on the sidelines watching it. We had just come off the field. We had a big turnover right there. So we were expecting like, okay, yes, we're going to do it. I remember Stanley Owens had gotten hurt that game. He went down, had a big collision with Willie Gaston that went on to play at the University of Alabama that game. I ended up playing with a couple of guys at Troy. O'Neal Yates was one of those guys that played on that team. But we thought it was good. Larry Norton, another friend of mine who's since passed away, bless him. And we were celebrating like, okay, we're fixing to win. We're fixing to get ready to go to the next round. And they waved the field goal off and said it was no good. And, you start all over again and here you go.
Yeah.
That hurt.
It sounds like the wind was completely out of the sails, but if that kick is kicked at Rip Hughes, we know what happens.
Yeah.
Well, Reeivice, I know that after high school, you ended up furthering your academics as well as your athletics at Troy. What led you to go to Troy? When did they get on your radar? What was not your temperament, but your desire to play on the next level and those kind of things?
So, believe it or not, I was kind of probably at that point in time just known for being a little spoiled, a little lazy, and not working as hard as I needed to up until about my senior year. And we were obviously all hurt when Coach Parrish decided to leave. I mean, that stung. But, he purposely, I think, worked to make sure that we got somebody that would come in and take care of us, and Coach Whitcomb. I really had, no real plans until one of the coaches puts one of those letters in your hand and says, hey, you got a shot to play ball at the next level. Well, then your ears perk up. And I'll never forget this. Coach Whitcomb, took me in the gym and sat me down one summer. He called me up there over the summer and said, what do you want to do? You want to play ball at the next level? And I said, yeah. He showed me a letter. I think it was from Mississippi State. And I was like, oh, yes, whatever. And then what he did was he walked me up to the office to go pull my transcript. Miss C was up there. Some other people were up there too. He pulled my transcript and brought me back down to the gym. Nobody was in the gym but he and myself. We sat up against the wall and he said, you can't play with these grades on the next level. But he broke it down for me and told me exactly what steps I needed to take in order to get qualified. I hadn't taken the ACT yet. And there were some classes that I needed to take and register for in summer school and some A's that I needed to make because I had, a lot of C's and stuff like that on my, I didn't make any F's, but I just was lazy and not putting forth a lot of effort. So I was real close, but I wasn't there. He said, you got to make this in this class. You got to make this in this class. He charted the course out. And because of that, I was able to be laser focused the rest of my senior year. I went on to get one of the most improved academic awards from a couple of my teachers, which is probably still one of the greatest honors I've ever had. But that is what propelled me to want to play at the next level was that. So and then of course you go to college and and you see what it's like playing on that level. It's a whole nother deal than playing at high school. You know, you got everybody's out there is competitive. Everybody's out there competing for a starting job, and you have to get used to that if you're going to be able to play and rise up to it.
Well, you certainly did rise up. You certainly did meet those goals, those expectations. And I want to be mindful of your time this evening. So I want to kind of pivot a little bit. There's so much to talk about right there. But one of the things that I enjoy from these conversations is learning the Cougars' history, their story, their journey, how they got to where they are. You now are in a fantastic position leading a large high school as a principal, and I know you enjoy that. There's so many aspects of that that are challenges as well as rewards potentially there for you. But you didn't just get there overnight. And one of the funniest things I've ever heard is uh, somebody said, "Yeah, I was an overnight sensation. It just took me 23 years to get there." So a lot of things had to have occurred in your life that you've used and utilized as lessons. And I know you've shared them with your children and maybe the kids who are in your schools. And so for Cougars who may be watching this later on in the younger generations, I want these conversations to be learning ones. And so I want you to share a little bit about you shared about your journey, but what are some of those lessons? You were starting to tell us a little bit with Coach Whitcomb, because that certainly set you on the straight right there. But
Yes.
there's so many lessons that I'm hearing from you, but I want you to kind of give us a little bit of from you.
Well, the late James Thomas was a counselor at Honeysuckle Middle School. He lived right catty corner across the street from me. And when I was in the 6th grade, he was working with a group called D1C, the Dothan 100 Club. And there were several kids, most minorities, lower class, kids that were just coming up. And they'd have like after school programs and things like that. But he took me and several of my friends down to Tampa, Florida to go see Bethune-Cookman play Florida A&M. And I really had not been out of Dothan very much, but that was the first time that I had been exposed to that type of environment. And I saw people, all races and colors, just thousands and thousands of people. I'm like, man, this really happens in real life. And so that one moment got me to think about what might be able to happen for me in the future. And when I got to college, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to be, but I knew what I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was that I wanted to give kids exposure to what their potential could unlock for them. And that's what James Thomas did for me. And I've been doing that over the course of my entire career, whether it's been as a teacher, as a coach, as an administrator, as a nonprofit business executive, in coaching my kids' sports or whatever the case may be. You have to show kids what they can become. If I can see it, I can be it. And one of the things that drives me is trying to do that for kids, to make sure that they know what's out there for them. But I told you earlier how important relationships are, and just teamwork. And we think about how important that is right now in the midst of COVID and all this kind of stuff. But there's so many things that I've picked up from playing sports, getting to know people from different ethnic backgrounds, from different socioeconomic backgrounds. You learn how to, to be in the projects, having a conversation, or you know what I'm saying, to go out to Westgate Village and have a conversation. But you've got friends in all those different groups, guys that went on to go to different schools, and like yourself, that you see being successful. You take bits and pieces of all those things and you apply them to your life, and you just keep working hard.
Golly, couldn't said it any better. And I love what you just said. If I can see it, I can be it. And it sounds like once you get exposed to new experiences, and if it's something that is of interest to you, or maybe for the betterment of your life or those around you, then it may be a worthwhile endeavor. And just like you were saying, as a 10th grader, you were behind Moses Lee on the line and had to earn your spot. But then as an 11th grader, you had the health scare, and you just kept plugging away. And Before we get out of here, Reeivice, I don't want to get away from, and I don't know if you guys who've been watching this series have realized how many former Northview Cougars are in education, coaching, or both in the Wiregrass area. In addition to Reeivice, we've got Mike Henry at Carroll, Tracy Donnell, I believe is at Enterprise, Janaski is at Dothan. I'm sure you know of others. That's 4 immediate names that come to mind. And I'm sure there are many others. And for those of you watching, if you know of others who are currently in, doesn't have to be just in the Wiregrass, but who have stayed in education or in coaching or in both, put it in the comments section. I think that it's such a underappreciated profession. And so I'm thanking you, Reeivice, for what you're doing.
Yeah.
Not just the success of the football or volleyball programs, but more importantly, what you're doing in shaping young people's lives and being such a positive influence on them.
It's nothing like paying it forward. And I'm sure the guys that you've mentioned, most of them, like myself, are doing it because somebody did it for us. Those people that I mentioned to you, you know, my dad passed away a little over 10 years ago now. And Gary Atkins, who was my coach then, he's the reason I'm in Eufaula. As a matter of fact, he recruited me to Eufaula. I hadn't seen him until I got to college at the little recruiting fair. And because of the relationship we had, offers I had to go everywhere else took a back seat. I said, I'm going to be with Gary in Eufaula. And we've continued that relationship. But since my father passed away, he and several other guys that I have stayed connected with are kind of like surrogate fathers to me. I still keep in contact with Coach Griffin. I still keep in contact with Mr. Jones. I still keep in contact with so many other people that were teachers and coaches of mine. Even call them from time to time to get advice. You know, what I'm thinking about taking this position or career move or family, whatever the case may be. And they still offer that wisdom up to you. And that's what lets you know that it really means something.
Oh, that's so awesome. I love hearing stories like that. And it's just, you're right. We all need people as mentors and to pay it forward to be a mentor. Mm-hmm. And thank you, Tracy. I meant Tracy Cantaloupe. I do apologize. I misspoke a few minutes ago. Well, Reeivice, I could talk to you all night, bud, but I know you've got stuff to do, and as do I. And this series, these conversations with Cougars are just it's so meaningful, so fun, telling the oral history of our program and reconnecting so many people together. I really enjoy it. And guys, if I haven't reached out to you already about being on the show, I apologize, but feel free to reach out to me if I haven't and you'd like to be on this. We spend between 30 minutes and an hour and we talk about some good life lessons, and most of the on-field stories are true, or there's some truth in there somewhere. But guys, thank you again for spending another Wednesday with us, and y'all just keep doing what you're doing. Y'all be safe. Have a good week.
Thank you.